All right, everybody. I'm Stephen Grambling. I'm the U.S. gaming analyst for Morgan Stanley. Next up, we have investing in the future of lottery, which is going to be a very topical session, given some of the news that's been out there, both in terms of consolidation in the space and broadly from a legalization standpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and have the group come on up. Now we've got, who's going to be first up? Tom Metzger from Lotto.com. Brad Cummings from EQ, it's no longer EQ Games, it's EQL, and Akshay Khanna, who's from Jackpot. So thanks for joining us. And thanks everybody for being here. Just to set the stage, would love to have each of you just provide for the audience a little bit about yourself and your business, and then we'll jump from there.
Sure. Hi, I'm Tom Metzger. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. I'm CEO of Lotto.com. We are what's called a lottery courier. I know it's a short panel, so I'll keep it quick. We opened our doors June 1st, 2020 in the middle of the pandemic with 4 employees. Since then, we've grown to 160 employees nationwide. We're live in 8 states and growing at give or take 300% or so a year. So it's exciting times in the lottery space.
Great.
I'm Brad Cummings. I'm the founder and CEO of EQL Games. We're a little different than these two guys. These guys are a courier platform like a Jack Pocket. I'm sure everyone is familiar with that, right?
Who?
I knew you'd like it if I brought them up. And so what we do is we work more directly with the lotteries themselves. So we supply games directly through like the Virginia Lottery website as opposed to being something separate. And we came on that. Our original vision for the company is a series of lottery games based on live sporting events. That's still very much part of our future, but we found that building an iLottery only aggregator was a real value to the industry, and there was sort of a soft underbelly of content needs in lottery, and so that aggregator has been kind of our initial bread and butter, and then we're growing from there.
And to your point earlier, he's B2G, very much B2G, and we're very much B2C.
Yeah.
Although we do work closely with, say, lotteries.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I'm Akshay Khanna. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Jackpot.com. We are also a lottery courier. We've been around for a couple of years now, including in New York. And Stephen, as you alluded to, obviously somewhat familiar with the news that's been in the market recently. So happy to chat all about that.
So maybe we'll start with you, Brad, because you're in the middle a little bit of
physically as well.
Physically and
literally
from
in the
a
middle.
business standpoint.
Yes,
maybe talk to us a little bit about the evolution of the industry as you see it, looking back, just like the history of it, and what you think we should be anticipating going forward, both in terms of more courier, iLottery. What do you think is the next evolution?
Yeah, well, this is interesting because actually looking at the way iLottery is evolving in the space is actually very informational to the history of lottery and how we got here. So lottery has traditionally been a retail business in a store, and therefore you only needed a vendor for your system and maybe a vendor to do your scratch-off tickets, right? And so it created almost by definition a more siloed approach. Very insular. It's why a lot of people at these kind of conferences have not thought about lottery, because it's like if you're not IGT or Scientific Games or a couple other guys, it's very, very hard to get there. And what that did is it actually started, once we moved into digital, it created a content deficit because they took the same approach on the digital contracts as they did with retail. So you don't need another vendor to do a pick 3 game for you. If you have IGT as your vendor, they're perfectly capable of it. But when you start going to digital content, and you start to need content variety and frequency and new products every week, that's when it started to kind of fray a little bit, and that's where companies like us are coming in and providing a solution. and I think that's the digital focus of the industry. As that grows, it's actually forcing the business model of lottery to change, which is great news for anybody at a conference like this, because it does open up a path for iGaming studios, other related type of businesses to maybe actually get into the lottery space, especially on the digital side.
Great. So then as we think about the size of the industry, maybe we'll start with Tom this time, in terms of how do you think about the sheer size of this, putting it into perspective versus sports betting and iGaming, and how quickly it's been growing?
Sure, that's a great question. I had the pleasure of working at Camelot for a couple of years, and I always like to use the UK as a great comp for the US lottery market. So Camelot launched their digital channel back in 2009, and what we've seen is their digital channel has grown from 0% of sales to roughly 43% of lottery sales in the UK are now online. So if you take that as what I think is the best comp in the industry, and you extrapolate that towards the US is give or take 105 billion lottery market is what we use.
Yeah.
So 43% of that is, it's a huge opportunity. It's a $40+ billion opportunity. By my calculations, and I exclude electronic instants and iLottery slot machines, I exclude that from my calculations. But I think less than 2% of the traditional lottery market, in terms of draw-based games and scratch games, is currently online. So it's just a massive opportunity, which is I think why we saw that recent large acquisition in our space.
Akshay, would you add anything to that in terms of how you think about the size or the growth?
It was interesting. I was at one of the panels earlier, and it was interesting listening to Adam Greenblatt of BetMGM talk a little bit about how much of an opportunity there still is on the gaming side, on iGaming, but also on sports betting, and how we've sort of come to accept sports betting in a way that 5 years ago would have been unimaginable. And yet, if you actually look at the math, there's so much more left than has already occurred, right? Yeah. And so in kind of the cliched analogy of what inning of the baseball game that we're in, with sports betting, we're in, some people would think we're in the 6th inning, we're really only in the 3rd inning. With lottery, it's like the coin toss hasn't happened yet. Like we're
the dugout.
We're so early, and there's so much green space ahead of us. And it always surprises me that people that lottery lives in this sort of quiet underbelly, even at conferences like this. Frankly, it's a good thing.
We don't need more competitors.
Tom makes my life miserable as is. I say that in the nicest way.
I think that's a compliment.
I say that in the nicest way. And so, the scale is one that anyone who spends 30 seconds looking at this industry, Tom broke down the math for you, it's almost unimaginable. And I'd wrap it up by saying, I tell people, $100 billion+ industry with less than 2% digital penetration may exist somewhere else. I don't know of another one.
And from
it's unique to America, right? When you look at the evolution that's happened overseas, we've got a long ways to catch up.
Long way to go.
Yeah, no, it's a very disruptable industry in that way, for sure.
And we've seen different unit economics manifest themselves in either sports betting and iGaming, both overseas and in the US. How should we be thinking about the economics of this business, thinking about profitability long term? Is there any reason why it would be different? And I realize there's different kind of pieces of the business.
Well, I'll talk about our piece and give Tom and Akshay a chance to think about their answer. I don't know.
I was just going to say better and leave it at that. I suppose if you want to go into it, sure.
Yeah, no. Now I think I forgot what I was going to say. No, we were talking about, what was the question again, Steve? I'm sorry.
So economics of the business.
Yeah. Well, here's a really good example. So I always talk about iGaming and iLottery as they look exactly the same on the outside, but on the inside, they're exactly opposite. So for instance, anybody here who's an iGaming studio or developer or whatever, you're used to going out there, getting on a site. If you're a good studio, you got good quality content, you can get a contract, most likely with an operator. And then it's all about fighting for shelf space. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. And so you might get above the fold, you may never get played. iLottery, if you're the product that's been launched in iLottery on a lottery website, you're going to be the only product in the upper left-hand corner for at least a week. You're going to stay there no matter what. It doesn't have anything to do with whether you bonus or you buy yourself over to the top. Like, you're the new product, you're going to be there. So you're going to get, you're going to do, in some lotteries, you're going to do between like $5 to $8 million in the first week coin in. And that's even if your game is just mediocre. And so there's like a different sort of dynamic to it. It's less frequent, right? Because I can't launch 50 products on a site in a week. But when you get into the stream, which is the challenge of lottery, is actually getting the contract. That, once you get past that, that is actually a much better unit economic than say a traditional iGaming product.
And I can talk a little bit about the difference in economics between iLottery and Courier. So on iLottery, you have the technology suppliers who are for the most part taking a percentage of net profit. So that can be anywhere from 10 to 15%, give or take, after prizes and everything. Our business, actually, and my business, we charge a convenience fee on top. So the profit margins are actually much higher in terms of returns to lottery, where we return the same percent as traditional retail and then charge a convenience fee on top. As you know, as you may or may not know, lotteries operate at extremely high profit margin. Most state lotteries operate around 30% profit margin, and that's after all of their costs and prizes. I mean, we'd all love to have an EBITDA, 30% EBITDA business after prizes. So we provide a great convenience to the lottery in that they have the exact same economics as they do with traditional retail, and we just charge a small convenience fee on top for our services.
I think, Stephen, it's also important to go into why, right? So I jokingly said better. The answer is better. But there's also the question of like, well, better, but why? And it's not because we've figured out some secret unlock on the courier side. It may also be that, but it's largely because we don't have a lot of the barriers on the lottery side that, frankly, the iGaming, the online casino, the sports betting folks have, which is, one, the lottery is, at this point, a uniquely American and a especially American concept where Americans don't view the lottery as gambling. An insane percentage of Americans, more than half, buy at least one lottery ticket a year. And so there's less education that's required to convince people to buy lottery tickets because they're already doing so. There's less education that's then required to explain how the lottery works, unlike sports betting or even online casino products. And so at the end of the day, what you're spending money on as an operator is really trying to convince people. Tom is trying to convince people that they should shop on his platform. We're trying to convince people that they should shop on our platform. But there's significantly less that's required to get that initial step, right? You don't have to explain to people what a money line is, or what a parlay is, or what plus 200 means. The lottery is just so in our DNA already, and it's so simple. And so that education comes with a cost that we don't have to bear.
And what you're saying is actually very much born through history and also how players play currently in the U.S. So a lottery traditionally comes out of the numbers games from like the Northeast, New York, Massachusetts, that sort of thing, the factory games that back in the 30s, 40s. And so what you see is actually far more player base in those areas. So to your point, the history actually informs the player base today, which is like, for instance, Massachusetts, the per capita is over $1,000 a person in lottery a year. And so
that's for every person. That's not just lottery players of age.
No, that's the 23-year-old in Boston who doesn't even care about lottery. He's counted in that too, right? And so that's just such a much easier communication, to your point, actually.
So you touched on this a little bit, but maybe dive in a little bit about who the customer is, then how it compares to sports betting and iGaming, and maybe even if you can give any sense for frequency. How does that change versus brick and mortar, like traditional lottery?
Sure. So I used to be an investor before I was a founder, and I would ask people who ran businesses, who is your customer? Yeah. And I can't tell you the number of times that someone would say everyone. And I'd be like, everyone cannot be your customer. People ask me who's your customer, and I say everyone, and it drives me crazy. But truly, like, more than 53% of Americans bought a lottery ticket. So anyone above the legal playing age truly is either an existing lottery buyer or a potential lottery buyer. I think the thing that we see, unsurprisingly, is our customer tends to be younger. Our customer tends to be wealthier than the median lottery player. And it is a fundamentally different customer. It's someone who would not otherwise buy lottery tickets, potentially. That's a group of people who would not otherwise buy lottery tickets because the current process of buying tickets in person is annoying, painful, cash-focused, is just not the way that people are used to transacting in 2024. But then there's also the buyer who currently goes to a brick-and-mortar store, who will still go to a brick-and-mortar store, but will now purchase with greater frequency because in addition to the tickets they may have bought at name your store, 7-Eleven, CVS, Target, et cetera, they're now sitting at home and saying, oh, I just realized I only bought tickets to this game, not that game. I just realized the jackpot was X, not Y. I don't feel like leaving my house. Now I can do it from the comfort of my home. And so it is a slightly younger audience. It is a slightly wealthier audience. It is both the audience that currently buys lottery tickets and an audience that has never previously purchased lottery tickets. And more than anything, it actually is an almost perfect summation of the breakdown of the American population. So it truly is everyone.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for Akshay, but I think that our customer is very much not your traditional retail customer. Many of our customers have never played the lottery before, because where's lottery available, right? It's available in mostly bodegas and gas stations. Most people go pump their gas. 90% of people that go to the gas station don't get out of their car and go into the convenience store. So we're very much, I think I agree that our customers are definitely wealthier. They have been very agnostic about convenience fees. People in the higher demographics, you frequently hear them say, oh, I don't play Powerball until it's over 500 million. Or, oh, I don't play until it's over $1 billion. But that's largely because the lottery is not where they are, right? The lottery doesn't come to them. So we find that we get, huge peaks in registrations during high jackpot runs, obviously. But the difference is that companies like ours have the tools to keep them coming back, and in a convenient way. And so, and we find that their per spend is much higher. I'm, quite frankly, not trying to convert the traditional lottery player who goes to the coffee shop in the morning and buys a 50-cent pick 3 with his cup of coffee. I don't want to convert that customer to lotto.com because I don't think they're going to have a high LTV. And so we're very much interested in catering to the younger, wealthier, more tech-savvy demographics, which is great for the lotteries that we serve as well, because they're very concerned about cannibalizing retail, which is their bread and butter. And so when I can show them statistics that prove that all of our customers are in fact incremental, that they weren't otherwise addressing, they're usually pretty happy with that.
Yeah, I'm going to flip this a little bit because we're a B2G business, so I'm going to talk about the customer as a lottery as opposed to a lottery player.
Yep.
And so anybody here who's looking at getting into space, we talk about how we're building a business for people who go home at 5 o'clock. And I don't mean that in any pejorative way. These are state agency employees. Most people in this room are incentivized by some level of stock options or bonuses or whatever. They're not. They get a very cost of living increase. The carrot at the end of it all for them is the 30-year retirement in the pension. And so everything and the reason they've made that choice is because they want to go home they want to get to the baseball game. They want to go home for dinner. And so we have to build a business so that if I come to a lottery and I propose something and that's going to make them go home at 6, I'm talking, of course, in a theoretical sense, but if that requires more of them, they're probably not going to want to take it on. And it's because of the model that they operate in. And so everything that you do for lottery, you have to remember where they are and where the lottery employee that steers that business is. You cannot treat them like a BetMGM operator or any other operator that we work with within the gaming business, because their realities are entirely different.
And they're extremely risk averse.
For that reason, right?
Yeah, nobody wants to be first. Second or third maybe, but.
And the only way for them to lose their job is to be down 1 year from the next.
So within sports betting and iGaming, there's always a focus on the path to legislation, but also regulation. Help us frame what the regulatory backdrop looks like and legal backdrop looks like and how that might be changing and what you have your eye on.
Well, ours is really simple. There's only 2 states in the country where lottery courier is explicitly illegal.
Yep.
Wisconsin and Virginia, right? Yeah. And so, I view our market as every state that except those 2 that has a lottery.
Yep.
In some states that you might require a minor regulatory change, which is a lot lighter of a lift than passing legislation, for example.
Yep.
And so, I don't know if you asked this question, but anecdotally, right now what's on most states' to-do list is sports betting first, because everybody wants to bet on football, right? Then once that's been launched, then the operators say, okay, well, we make more money off iGaming, so let's do iGaming next.
Yep.
So if you look at the history of iLottery legislation, it was federally made legal back in 2011. Yep. And we're sitting here now in 2024, and there's what 10 or 11
Fewer than 10 states, yeah.
10 or 11 iLotteries in the country. So,
Yeah, full iLotteries,
So
yeah.
it's less than one per year, and I don't see that pace changing because legislators are risk averse. Lottery directors are risk averse. They don't like to stick their necks out politically. Whereas for lottery couriers, it doesn't require much of anything.
Right.
In order for them to launch, and we're incremental right off the bat.
What'll be interesting is whether the energy around courier starts to push the lotteries to go online faster
We're
too.
seeing that in New Jersey. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I mean, I think from a market share concern and all different kinds of reasons, and just the water's warmer now. It's not you're not sticking your neck out like you maybe were a couple of years ago.
What drives success for each of your businesses within the industry, and how do you think about competition?
I mean, for us, it's a simple formula. We have a couple of folks from our team here. They hear me say this all the time. It's customer acquisition, customer retention, right? Get the right people in the funnel.
Yep.
And as Tom alluded to, make sure that they continue playing, right? And make sure that they play more than they otherwise would. Make sure they play in a responsible manner. And it's really as simple as that. Everything else becomes pillars to support those two fundamental growth levers. And I would argue that each of those is equally important because you can't retain customers you don't have, but at the same time, we've seen a lot of businesses over the course of the last 10 years in particular, with relatively cheap money funding them, acquiring a ton of customers without having a clear retention plan or at least a retention framework in mind, and churning through customers and then having to reacquire them over and over again. Fundamentally, those are the two levers. Like I said, everything else, whether it's regulatory, operational, and there are significant regulatory and operational challenges in any of these businesses, those are the pillars that keep this business up. But the growth comes from acquiring the right customers and then making sure you're retaining them at a pretty high level. And in our case, the ones who go to sleep for a little while, making sure you're waking them back up when the jackpot is above X. X changes per person. But that's one of the perhaps slightly different aspects of this business is the reactivation pace.
Yeah, I think Akshay and I sort of agreed on the give or take 2% penetration on traditional lottery online. So I really don't spend too much time worrying about who our competitors are. I think the market is so big that like if we're going to go from that 2% to the UK at 43% and there's 40 billion in growth, I just worry about growing my business, acquiring new customers, making sure the regulators are happy, responsible gaming, and adding new jurisdictions. I don't really spend too much time, and we actually occasionally share thoughts on because until that new state adopts courier, we're not competitors, right?
Right.
So frequently we have conversations, to work together on getting new states on board.
Yeah, from our perspective, it's great content and technology that makes their lives easier. We're in a space where there's most of the technology is very legacy technology, and so we can do integrations in virtually half the time that our competitors can, and so that really opens up possibilities for lotteries that they don't understand currently or previously. And then why I think our business is really starting to take off now is because we're finding great content in the iGaming space and bringing it into lottery. And so that content and so anybody here is an iGaming studio that would like to talk about getting a lottery, we'd love to talk because I think we can be a conduit to that. And so what it's doing is it's stepping up the game. The big leaders in the industry make products that really work. So nothing wrong with them, but there's just you guys in the iGaming space are just killing each other for shelf space. So just by sheer free market principles, the product is going to get insanely better. And so we now just want to bring those products over to lottery and lift the level of the product there as well.
So you referenced customer acquisition and retention key. Can you share anything about how customer acquisition and explicitly customer acquisition costs compare to, for example, sports betting or iGaming? Same thing for retention. There's been public dissemination from FanDuel, DraftKings on some of these topics. So even relative to those, any color you could provide there?
So I will not share ours, but I'll do you one better because, for those of you that don't know, another lottery courier was purchased, the announcement was made that it was acquired by DraftKings, and DraftKings very kindly...
Wait, who?
No, I mean, listen, a lot of credit to the Jackpocket folks. Obviously, that transaction really has opened a lot of eyes to this world, to the lottery courier space.
Yep.
But I don't need to share any data because DraftKings very generously shared their data on an earnings call publicly, and they stated that blended acquisition costs across sports betting and online gaming were about 80%, I believe, higher than what it was for Jackpocket's lottery business. That is an order of magnitude that is pretty significant. They didn't talk about payback periods because I don't know that there are payback periods yet on some of those products. But
We have payback periods.
But I mean, certainly on the acquisition costs, like it was clear to see. And while I don't think they went into the specifics on the retention piece, the fact of the matter is that a lottery buyer is an incredibly sticky customer, and that is something that we obviously strive to improve with the product that we bring to market and with the attempts that we make on customer retention and reactivation. But we are blessed by having an already sticky customer be part of our base.
We know from our colleagues in Europe that there's a very high cross-sell between online lottery and online casino. So I think the best conversion, or the easiest conversion, since as Akshay was talking about before, lottery doesn't require any skill. The highest conversion is really going to be from lottery to slot machines, and then sports betting somewhere beneath that in terms of conversion rate.
Yep. So we're just about out of time. I'm going to do a quick lightning round for each of you. Give me one innovation or one focus point for you as you look out the year ahead.
Well, my answer is easy. I used to work at Scientific Games, and so I know quite a bit about the scratch ticket market here in the U.S. and abroad. The U.S. lottery market, of that 105 billion, over 2/3 of it is scratch tickets. And so we've developed a proprietary solution, now live in 3 states, Texas, Colorado, and Ohio, where we're selling traditional paper scratch-based tickets, but online. So we've developed a very cool process where a customer can purchase. We only sell high denomination tickets because we're catering to that's our customer base. And they can we put a digital covering on it. They can actually reveal the ticket on their tablet or with their finger or on their phone with a mouse. Sorry, the other way around. You know what I mean. But they can scratch it online virtually. And I think that over time we're going to see that's going to be a big chunk of our growth.
That's great.
We're going to go back to where we once belonged, and in the next year, you'll see some sports lottery products based on the results of live sporting events that are lottery products. And a real simple version of that is a 10-game parlay that instead of you picking your teams, you get them quick picked. But to make it a lottery product, you're winning for as few as 6 out of 10. Up to 10 out of 10 matching. So you're sort of lotterizing and broadening the lottery experience with a live sports experience. And so you'll see that from us in the next year or so.
Key area for focus for us is going to be expanding the number of states that allow lottery courier, or that explicitly allow lottery courier services to exist. I mean, there's some big ones out there that aren't currently where lottery couriers aren't currently operating, or if they are operating, they're not operating with the blessing of the local state lottery. I happen to live in one of those states, which is the largest state in our country. And so expanding beyond the states in which we're currently in is going to be a major area of focus for us in 24.
Great. Well, Tom, Brad, Akshay, thanks so much for all the time and insight today. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was great.